In the Know, a radio program talking to the newsmakers in Ogle, Lee, DeKalb counties and beyond, keeping you in the know. Here's your host, Charles Van Horn.
Good morning, and joining us in studio, Chuck Roberts of local fame and a half, owner of Roberts Armory. Chuck, good morning to you.
Good morning.
It is glad to have you in the studio with us to chit-chat about everything. For those of us who don't know much about you, first off, Chuck, where'd you grow up at? Where'd you go to school? Things like that.
Okay, I'm an Army brat, so I grew up all over the world, but I'm from Massachusetts, and I always tell people that I escaped a communist country, Massachusetts, to come to Illinois. But I've been at various locations. It would be the Philippines, Japan, Korea, Alaska,
and that
area.
And that was because your father was in the service then?
That is correct.
What was his role in the military? What was his duties?
He was in logistics, and he was assigned to General MacArthur's staff in Japan, and the mission for him was to rehabilitate Japan and get the economy going as quick as they could. And MacArthur was quite generous about that to Japan. He wanted to make sure that it became a democracy and flourished after the war, unlike Germany after World War I, which gave a rise to very difficulties like Hitler and the fascists.
So growing up, you got to sort of be witness to a lot of historical things happening around while you were in places. What years were you in the Philippines?
In the Philippines, I was there from 48 to 49. Manuel Quezon was the leader of the Philippines. And then I was in Japan from 49 to 50, and I got to see MacArthur periodically. Of course, I was only 5 years old at the time, and he wouldn't necessarily say hello to me. He would walk by with a military presence and bearing, looking off into the distance with a very ornate hat. And we all just saw him as a huge hero.
And that's got to be incredible, I guess, to retrospect, look back at the man who, controversially at times, did so much for the military, and certainly have your father be a part of that. And did that, of course, inspire you to get into the service?
Well, it was an inspiration to me, and certainly when I was young. But as I got older and joined the military during the Vietnam War, I was sort of less enthusiastic about it because of the poor treatment of veterans at the time. Back in the 78, 79, 80, there was a famous movie star that was in Hanoi bad-mouthing the troops that were in Vietnam, and that just wasn't helpful. And consequently, when I got out, the veterans just were not held in high esteem. Then in recent years, it's changed around significantly. And now people say to me, thank you for your service. And I remember the first time I heard that, I was looking around, who are they talking about? And it was most of the veterans that had served in a time frame are being thanked now. And it's wonderful to have that now, a big turnaround. And it seems like military service is held in higher esteem now than it was then.
And what branch did you serve in, and where were you deployed to?
I was in the Ordnance Corps, and since I was already a degreed engineer when I went in, they sent me right away to a proving ground in a GS-12 slot, which is normally $10,000 to $11,000 a year for a civilian. But for me, as an Army guy, it was only like $2,000 a year, so they made money on that.
Yeah.
But what I did is I tested equipment coming back from Vietnam and tried to figure out why it was not working properly.
Wow. So there was a lot of challenges there that were crucial because a lot of the equipment stuff being used was helping try to keep the boys alive, I'm sure.
Very much so, and they had the problems. However, we did test the moon vehicle. That was sort of fun, because Yuma Proving Grounds looks like the moon. It's a desert with a lot of rocks on it. And so the moon vehicle would be running back and forth, and it was being tested prior to the launch. And then we also tested other equipment that never worked, like the Cheyenne helicopter was never developed, and there were a couple other vehicles that didn't work. But most of it was being tested, and we wrote reports on what went wrong, sent it to the factories, and I spent most of my time testing vehicles and doing paperwork.
After your time was done, what brought you to Rochelle?
Well, we moved to Chicago back in the early 70s because the jobs were very good. And then we had our own business, consulting business for a while, and then that was in Warrenville. And that got a little too crowded, and so we moved out to Big Rock. And then that got crowded. And then we moved out to Rochelle, which appears to be less crowded. We have a farm out here, and it's a very nice place to be.
And your farm is also home to something else we'll talk about in a few moments.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. The couple of questions going back to your testing time at Yuma. You talked about the lunar rover. Now, that is definitely one of the most unique vehicles in American history. How is that powered? Because I know it's got a unique drivetrain system.
It's essentially electric motor powered and has solar collectors on it to help charge up the batteries. And it has not too much of a suspension and doesn't go very fast, but it has very wide tires so that it can operate on the moon. There was worry about it sinking into the moon dust, but it never did. And it worked fine, and it's still out there.
There was one of them I know they had to do an emergency repair on the moon. I think you might be familiar with that story.
I can't recall the exact nature of it, but the vehicle was designed to be easily maintained in various environments, and there were tools available, and there was anticipation if something went wrong on the moon, they'd hopefully be able to fix 90% of the problems.
I believe they broke a fender, and they fixed it with duct tape and a map, I believe, is what happened.
I think so. I think you're correct on that.
So that's got to be quite the interesting life of the things you've encountered. You know, McCarthy, of course, and then you've got the lunar rover. And now let's talk a bit about the things you've begun to collect. Now, what was the first piece of military equipment that you acquired, and how did that come about?
Back in '87, I picked up a half track, which has a track on the back and the wheels on the front. And I got it from another collector, and I promised my wife I would only get one military vehicle.
Now, how's that working out for you?
The promise was not kept, unfortunately, and I think we have about 18 or 19 of them in the museum right now.
So the half track, what year is it? Where was its origin?
It's a 1943 half track made by White Motor Car Corporation.
And did it see action anywhere, or was it stateside?
It was all stateside because there's no repairs or hits on it.
Okay. Do you have, and that was the first piece of equipment. What's the most unusual or rare thing that you guys have in the Armory?
Our most rare vehicle is, I think, the M7 snow tractor made by Alice Chalmers. There were only 290 of them ever made, and we got one in that was in pretty bad shape. We have restored it, and it runs very well.
Where did the snow tractor see service at?
Mostly in winter environments, such as in Thule, Greenland, and areas like that, as a way to rescue down sailors, down Air Force people in that area. And it towed a couple sleds to haul cargo and things of that nature.
What do you have any piece of equipment out there that was used in combat or saw military service in a region where there was active combat or military activity?
We may have one or two cannons that were used, but all the vehicles were not used because most of the vehicles were sent overseas, and they remained there because of the Act of 1939. None of that stuff was supposed to come back.
Yeah.
However, after the war, and there was not as much of the government watching what was coming back, brokers were bringing back equipment, and we got some of that. And for instance, one of our tanks came from Portugal. Another vehicle came from Chile, but they were World War II vehicles surplused out and essentially left at a junkyard.
These military vehicles, I'm sure that there's probably some significant paperwork. You can't just show up at the port in L.A. and unload a tank. Are there any hoops you have to go through to get some of these things back into the U.S.?
Well, the first thing you do is you hire a broker to do that, and he knows what to do and how to get it in. And for instance, when he goes to South America, you don't show up as an American wanting to buy something. You always have a broker of the same origin down there.
Yeah.
That otherwise the price goes up twice.
Oh, yeah.
And so that person will usually handle and brings it in, and then we use it in our museum. And if it's a tracked vehicle, it usually can't be registered with on-road plates. But the half-track can, because it has rubber tracks and doesn't bother the road.
The military equipment like tanks and cannons and things like that, is there federal requirements for those to be disabled so you can't just go off and shut down I-88 and start a war?
Yes. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms has very nebulous requirements for deactivating this stuff. And you try to do the best you can. Usually it's cutting a hole in the cannon or something of that nature.
Yeah.
And making it unusable or not having a breach on it or something like that. But if they really wanted to get after you, they could come and take all the stuff away if they felt like it.
But you hopefully won't have that happen. It is a exhibit with lots of different vehicles. And do you have other collectibles and the like for military service and military history there at the Armory?
Yes, we do. We have uniforms, firearms, other types of equipment, tables, phones, remote phones and wireless, walkie-talkies, and things of that nature. A lot of photographs from veterans and actually displays of veterans from Rochelle that served in World War II.
What's the oldest piece of military equipment, memorabilia, or something that was used by the military that you have?
I think we have something about from 1939. It was a mortar and some other artillery that are that old.
Chuck Roberts, Armory, from Roberts Armory. Your place, people can come and visit, right?
That's correct. We have a website, robertsarmory.com. And we're open 3 times a year: Memorial Day, Lincoln Highway Festival Day, and then Veterans Day.
And always a chance to see you out and about in parades and things, too.
Yes, we try to attend every parade we can with as many vehicles that are running and drivers that are available.
And that's got to be fun to get some of those things out. Well, fun to probably drive them in the parade. Probably not fun the 3 days beforehand to make sure that they all fire up and start.
Well, it takes a lot of work to get them all ready.
Yeah.
And probably for every hour you spend in a parade is about 3 or 4 hours fixing them and getting them ready. And fixing them after they break down or something like that after a parade.
If money and time was no object, what would be the one piece of military equipment you would love to have on display at the Armory?
Oh, I can't think of anything else. We've been offered a Sherman tank, but it's just too big for me to maintain myself.
Yeah.
We have a couple of smaller tanks, M22 Locust and a Stewart tank, which I can handle myself. But I can't think of much else other than maybe some B-29 bomber.
Oh, that'd be pretty.
Yeah, that we could hang out there or something like that. But otherwise, I can't think of anything else offhand.
If somebody wants to check out your website, obviously go visit it, and there's details there. If somebody has a unique piece of military equipment or memorabilia, how do they get a hold of you if you might be interested?
Well, on our website, there's an email, and we get a lot of emails with people donating equipment to the museum. And we accept only material from 1941 to 1945. We get a lot of other things that are attempted to be donated, but we just can't accept that. It's not in our time frame.
And if somebody wants to obviously find out more about the Armory, they can go to the website, but you've also written some books as well.
That's correct. I've written 6 books on World War II history, and if you're interested in those, You can go to our website, and there's a link to them online, mostly through Amazon, or just get online and Google Charles C. Roberts Jr. history books from World War II, and you'll get a bunch of them.
All right. Chuck Roberts, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for listening to this week's In the Know. The program returns next week at this time with another great conversation with someone from your community.